world. So we have several different things that we're going to be going through. First off, what is cancel culture? I put some stuff out on the Mama Bear page and was just kind of asking some of my Mama Bears their thoughts on this. And there are several of them that said, I feel stupid. Can you explain what cancel culture is? So we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about interacting with ideas, because I firmly believe that learning how to think through ideas is going to teach us how to basically interact with those ideas with other people. And unless we know how to properly kind of think through it, we're not going to know how to talk through it. And then finally, we're going to talk about preparing our kids to withstand cancel culture, because this is basically our modern version of persecution. And we as a church have really, I won't say as a church globally, because obviously there's still persecuted churches out there, but kind of in the West, we've gotten kind of comfortable being the majority. And in case you haven't noticed, we are not the home team anymore. Have you noticed that in culture, that we are not the home team, that we are not the majority? We cannot take it for granted that culture is going to be reinforcing our beliefs. And so at this point, the ones, if we have been content to not understand persecution, we're going to start understanding it really fast. And it's like, and we have to realize this is what we signed up for when we said, I will follow Christ. So I'm going to switch over. I'm going to try to switch back and forth between share screen here for some of these. So share. So this is disagreeing well in a cancel culture world. And so first off, let's talk about a definition of cancel culture. So I've got two definitions here. The first one is from just the Cambridge Dictionary. It's a way of behaving in a society or group, especially on social media, in which case it is common to completely reject or stop supporting someone because they have said or done something that offends you. So this would be kind of a real general one, but when I had one of the Mama Bears ask on one of the social media platforms, what is cancel culture? There were some girls that are involved with something called Women in Theology that I thought they gave a really good also answer, so I want to honor that. Cancel culture refers to the current cultural wave of canceling people when they say or do something that is not considered loving, tolerant, or politically correct. I'm using quotes because they don't define these words the way we would. And so I just want to give a plug for the next talk, where we're going to be talking about linguistic theft in the next section of what are some of these words that are being co-opted. So for an example, an actor getting fired for saying something that was perceived as racist 10 years ago, or an influencer losing followers because they say they believe homosexuality is a sin. So it's basically shunning, i.e. canceling, anyone who even goes slightly against the mainstream cultural beliefs and accepted ideas. Admit to that person. Okay, so I keep having people come in. This is not letting me, okay, there we go, stop sharing. So when we talk about cancel culture, we have to look at what our kids are experiencing. And this idea of basically being shunned by their friends, I mean, we kind of had that when we were younger in terms of Christianity or things that we did, or sometimes just physical things about our body. But it's very different from what they're experiencing now. So, but first, let's look at some of the examples in the Bible that we have, because I discovered not too long ago that while I thought cancel culture was kind of like this new thing, it's actually all throughout the Bible. And so we're going to take some of those examples and compare them to what our kids are experiencing. So the first one is Daniel and his friends. So there's two different passages in Daniel here. So Daniel 3 is where it's talking about Darius gave that edict that nobody could pray except to him alone, at the urging of some of his satraps, great idea. And so Daniel, what he does is, this is obviously an edict that goes against something that, what God has commanded. So not only does he pray, but he prays in the same way that he always did, which was from his window. Now, I also want to point out that he didn't go out to the middle of Main Street and pray out there and try to make a show of it. He quietly did it the way that he was called to do it, and he didn't change anything that he did. So this is one way to how we need to be behaving when the world is telling us things we can do or can't do. And then the second one with Daniel's friends, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. I've got this picture. Give me a thumbs up if you've ever seen this picture before. Nobody? Okay. So this is a fun picture. It's actually part of a larger picture where it's got all these people saluting to Hitler, and you've got this one guy sitting like this, and it's great just because it's like, you know what, we need to be that guy. So Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, when they were in the same, when they were in the kingdom, they were in exile. There was an edict that went out that there was this giant golden statue, this idol, that whenever the horn played and the different musical instruments, everybody had to bow. So basically they look like this guy, only more obvious. Think about everyone in a big crowd all bowing down, and you are standing up. So in this case, it's not necessarily not doing something that God has commanded you to do, but refraining from doing what the culture commands that you do. So it's like, sometimes you don't stand out because of what you do. Sometimes you stand out because of what you don't do. And so the punishment they had, of course, the first one was the lion's den, and the second one was the fiery furnace. So yeah, we had kind of more extreme cancel culture going on back then. So the next one was the blind man who was healed by Jesus. This was actually the first passage I ever noticed. I was like, this is like cancel culture, and this isn't a new thing. So we've got in John 9, the man who was the blind man who was healed by Jesus on the Sabbath. And what you see is the Pharisees are really angry about the fact that Jesus healed on the Sabbath. And so they call this man in, and they are just questioning him. And when they can't get the answer that they want, they call his parents in. And what you'll notice in the passage is the parents say that basically they didn't want to answer the questions for fear of being turned out of the synagogue. So when you were turned out of the synagogue, that wasn't the same as like being, oh, we'll find another church. Think about it. If this was the only place you could go for fellowship, this was where, a lot of the markets were, this is where all the worship was. Think about being in a small town where you can't move and there's one school and your kid gets kicked out of it. Or the kid, they get shunned there. Basically, they lose all just any ways to socialize with people. So this is that social ostracization. But what I like about him is he kept trying to answer questions in the way they were asking, and finally they just pushed him to the point. They wanted him to say that Jesus was not from God. And finally he said, look, God doesn't listen to sinners. He listens to the righteous man. All I know is I was blind and now I see. And this guy has to be from God because God does not listen to sinners. And so immediately they turned on him and said, you were steeped in sin at birth. How dare you lecture us? And they put him out of the synagogue. So he tried to, kind of give non-confrontational answers, but when pushed, he had to say what he knew was true, and he had to face the consequences. And this is something that we need to prepare our kids for, because it's not like we have to teach them to always go out loudly proclaiming everything. Like my pastor said when I was growing up, sometimes you're not being persecuted for righteousness. Sometimes you're being persecuted for being obnoxious. So we're going to talk about that a little bit later, like when to speak, when not to speak. But eventually we will be pushed to say what they know we're going to say. And they just want us to say it so that they can cancel. So the final one, this is like the ultimate cancel culture, was Jesus. And you can find that in all the Gospels. The thing that he was bucking is that he was not who they expected the Messiah to be. And I would say that this is something that we also have going on with our kids, because Jesus is frankly crazy popular among sometimes even atheists, among other religions. In fact, almost every other religion includes Jesus somewhere in their scriptures. Islam actually reveres Jesus as a prophet. They don't believe that he died on the cross, but they revere him as a prophet. So Jesus is still very, very popular. However, the Jesus of the Bible is not necessarily popular. And so this can be confusing to our kids when they hear people that are affirming Jesus and are celebrating Jesus, but then they're using that false Jesus to then affirm stuff that is not affirmed in scripture and things that Jesus did not affirm. So I want to talk about, oops, someone's still waiting. Unshare. So let's talk about cancel culture then and now. So when I say then, we just looked at the ones from the Bible, but I want to talk about when we were younger. So I know women aren't supposed to say their age. I'm 41. So, high school is still a ways away, but when I was in high school, the things that it's like you got teased, you maybe got shamed, but it was kind of this equal opportunity thing. Like if you were teased, it was because of usually something physical that was wrong. You know, you had the wrong hair, the wrong clothes, the wrong trapper keeper, your nose was too big, you were too fat, you were too thin, whatever. People would shame you, and it was this real individual thing. I would say that the generation now, there's a lot of them that are actually pretty good with policing that kind of stuff, that they really have this low tolerance for bullying, which I think is actually a good thing. However, that being said, what they are bullying now is for having the wrong beliefs. If you do not think according to what secular culture says you should believe, then you are a hated, you are a bigot, you are intolerant, you are pro injustice, you are against equality. I mean, every single word that you can possibly think of, which we'll talk about in the linguistic theft talk after this, that is what you're going to be accused of. And so there's a big difference between, I would say, if I was going to summarize what kind of the bullying, the shaming, and cancel culture was around when we were younger, it would be this thought of, there's something about you that I don't like. I don't like you. Therefore, I'm going to make fun of you for all these things. I want you to contrast that. Just really listen to this. Contrast that with what kids are being told today. It's not, I don't like you. It's, who you are is evil and you need to be destroyed. That is a completely different set of pressure. In fact, I even had a mama bear kind of respond to this. I think she later deleted it. And it was basically what I was told growing up, this idea of, if you just love like Jesus did, people will be drawn to you and they're going to be drawn to Jesus. And I would love to say that that's the case, but that is not the case anymore. There are some people where this is true. There are still people that the Lord is calling and who will respond to the actual message. But you have a lot more people who have a Jesus that doesn't exist. The Jesus who is all loving, never judges you, just wants to make you feel good about yourself. And unless you're preaching that Jesus, you are going to be hated. So we're going to move on to talking about interacting with ideas, because this is actually something we address in the Mama Bear book. How we interact with ideas personally is going to spill over into how we speak about ideas. And I think if we can model this for our kids, how to look through things to begin with, how to think through them rationally, then we can teach them how, that basically modeling that is going to teach them how to interact with people in this cancel cultural world. So the first topic we're going to talk about is the chew and spit method. So just with a show of hands for people who have read the Mama Bear book. Has anybody? Okay, awesome. We've got one. So this will be new information for y'all. So the chew and spit method, sorry, I'm going to admit this person real quick. Okay, the chew and spit method is just kind of understanding that most everything in culture is going to be a mixture of good and bad. That there's very few people who think, oh, I'm championing for evil. Everybody is thinking they're championing for the greater good. Although the ideas may not actually be good that they're champions. So what we're doing with chew and spit is we're teaching our kids to look at everything and say, what is the good that I can find there? Because almost everything you can find good in. Now, that being said, there's certain things you won't find anything good. So I'm just going to say porn. There's nothing good about porn. Don't chew and spit through porn, just spit. But things like, different music, different movies, even people, because what cancel culture says is you make one mistake and you gone. There is nothing good about you. There is nothing that we're going to accept about you. You make one mistake and you're out of there. Chewing and spitting tells us that people make mistakes. Songs sometimes have bad themes, but sometimes it's mixed with good themes. So this is the hand signal, and I'm going to ask y'all to do this with me, because especially if you have young children or if you have grandchildren, I think this is a great way to teach them, is you tell them this is what everything is here. It's a mixture of good and bad. And our goal with chewing and spitting is we separate the good from the bad, accept the good, reject the bad. So try that with me real quick. This is whatever idea it is. We're going to separate the good from the bad, accept the good, reject the bad. when kids are taught to chew and spit like this, they learn that you can't label things into all safe and all dangerous. And that was something that I grew up with, this idea that if something was Christian, then it was totally safe. But if something, was horrific, like Madonna or Michael Jackson, that was all dangerous. And what I discovered later on, as I got older is, there's still things I can appreciate in them. I remember seeing just briefly some concert by Madonna, and I was just blown away. I wasn't there. It was like a video of it. I was blown away by the artistry. And you know what? Excellence, I believe, is pleasing to God. We look at back in the, probably, what chapter is it? I think it's in Deuteronomy, where God's giving the instructions for making the tabernacle, for making the Ark of the Covenant. And he talks about that he gives the spiritual gift of design, clothing design, craftsmanship, that he doesn't just tell anybody, do your best and it's glorifying to me. He specifically empowers people to do excellent work. And so I think in some ways, excellence can be glorifying to God. And so even if something we don't like, we can still say, you know what, that was done really well. Maybe I don't like the message, but there's still something that we can agree with. So next, I'll just go real quick. I'm going to give y'all just the opportunity to, if you ever want to just take a screenshot, that you can. I'm gonna wait for a second in case you want us to take a screenshot of this. I'll wait 5 seconds and then keep going. 2, 3. Wow, we still have people coming in. Admit. Okay. Oh, so expecting persecution. This is several of the passages that I wanted to discuss actually, I'm sorry. I think I have my slides out of order. Okay. Okay, yes, my slides are out of order. So this is the ROAR method. We talk about this in the Mama Bear book, and ROAR stands for recognize the message, offer discernment, and although I've added offer objective discernment just because I think that's important, argue for a healthier approach, and reinforce the ideas. These are the steps that we're going to take when we're trying to basically chew and spit through anything in culture. So the first one, okay, so if you got your screenshot, I'll stop sharing so I can actually look at you and talk. So the ROAR method, first off, recognize the message. Basically, everything that you see has a message. Every song, every movie, it's going to have a message. And the question is, can you recognize it? So I'll give an example of one that drove me nuts. There was this, does anybody have young kids or grandchildren that they saw the movie Sing? And it's all these cartoon characters who were different animals that were doing a singing competition. Have y'all seen that? Raise your hand if you have. Okay, we got 1, we got 2. Okay, the thing that drove me nuts about that is I realized they had the main character lie through every single part. It's like he was trying to get away from, a creditor, and he was trying to convince someone that, oh, he has this money for this competition, and he just lied his way through. And I actually wrote a blog on it on Mama Bear and said, if you want to teach your kids to spot stuff, give them a thing of popcorn, go see this movie Sing, and tell them to take a bite of popcorn every time the main character tells a lie. But those lies weren't even supposed to be obvious. They were all pointing to a bigger truth, that the message of the show or of the movie Sing was, you need to follow your dreams no matter what. And so recognizing, this is the message. You need to follow your dreams no matter what. So, okay, now we've recognized the message to that. So we move on to the next one, offer objective discernment. Is following your dreams a bad thing? No. Are some of the things that he did while he was following his dreams a bad thing? Yeah. They had one of the characters was in it was this ape that was in kind of a gangster family, and following his dreams meant that he wasn't as good with helping his family do like bank heists. So we can say, okay, following your dream is good, and maybe we shouldn't be doing bank heists with the family. There was one with a mother who had a ton of kids, and it really portrayed motherhood as if it was these shackles that you needed to escape, and that motherhood was just dreary and unrewarding. And let's be honest, motherhood can be very unrewarding, but it's also very rewarding at the same time. So they were portraying it that way. So all throughout the thing. So what we could say with our kids was, what were some of the good things we noticed in here? Oh, we saw people pursuing their dreams. We saw people making music and being excellent in what they do. That's all stuff we can agree with. Now, what don't we agree with? Well, we don't agree with the way they portrayed mothers, or we don't agree with the way the main character lied through the whole thing, or we don't agree with, thinking that you have to follow your parents if they're telling you to do something illegal. That's not a good thing. So already they're starting to say, what's the good I can have? What's the good? What's the bad? I'm going to separate the good from the bad, accept the good, reject the bad. So that's when we move to argue for a healthier approach. And all of this will have to do with when we are talking to someone with whom we disagree as well. So in argue for a healthier approach, we're going to say, what are the things that we already said that we could agree on? And now we're going to bring the Bible in and we're going to complete it. Instead of having been a mixture of good and bad, we've now taken the bad out. We're going to take the good and then find where scripture affirms this and where scripture actually tells us we can do it better. Following your dreams, you know what? The Lord says that he has commissioned us for different things. And so we need to listen to the Lord. We know that he's commissioned us to be responsible. So is following my dreams being irresponsible? Maybe that's not the same thing. So just showing them, how does scripture affirm this and actually elevate this virtue better than just the worldly secular take on it? So again, we've recognized the message. We've offered discernment by separate the good from the bad, accepting the good, rejecting the bad. Now we've argued for a healthier approach. We've taken the good and we've said, how does scripture affirm this in a better way? And then finally is the reinforce these ideas with your kids. And so in the book, I kind of give little ideas, conversations that you can have with your kids to reinforce these ideas. But if we're talking about someone with whom we're disagreeing, maybe the reinforce is going to be providing evidence for what we believe. So we are going to look at part of that recognizing the message, and when we move to how to do the recognize the message when we're in a conversation with someone. I'm going to share this screen real quick so you can take a screenshot if you like. So these are the rules for active listening. I say that most people, their deepest desire is to be heard. And so when we are moving into how do we interact with people with this roar method, with the chewing and spitting, without going into cancel culture, or if they're already trying to cancel us, if they've moved into fight or flight, which we'll talk about in a little bit, what are some ways to maybe take them down to that and actually have a productive conversation? And I would say that most conversations are not productive because people don't know how to listen. So I'm going to take this down now. Stop share. So the first thing is we're listening not to respond. We're listening to understand. And you would be surprised at how easy, and I'm going to even say this for me, like sometimes I'm so used to being the one that's giving the talk that like when I'm talking with someone, I'm expecting, oh, they're wanting all these answers. No, sometimes they just want someone to listen and to understand. And I think especially when we're dealing with people who are kind of going crazy with some of the ideas that we see in culture, if you don't understand what they're saying, the conclusion that they make in their head is, I need to yell louder. That is not a way to have productive conversation. So we're not just listening to listening to respond, we're listening to understand. And secondly, we're specifically, and I cannot emphasize this enough, we are listening for what we agree with. So remember, in our recognize the message and our offering discernment, we are actively looking for something that we can agree with. So take, for example, feminism. There's, we'll be honest, there's a lot of crazy feminists out there, but at the same time, they have a legitimate point. We also see this happening. Basically, the three areas we're seeing this happening are along gender, race, and sexuality. And all of these people that are bringing forth grievances have some legitimate grievances that we need to affirm. If we just go into answer mode and we're not affirming what we can agree with first, that conversation is going to be over. So the way that we do this, listen for it, listen for what you can agree with. And then instead of starting your response, what you're going to do is you're going to try to summarize what you think they said, because until they know that you actually heard, and I've got the scarecrow, or if you noticed, you can't see it now, I had a scarecrow as the picture for that one. Does anyone know what a straw man? Raise your hand if you know what a straw man argument is. Okay, about half of y'all. So straw man argument is where you misrepresent the argument that they're making. And we don't want to do that. That's a great way to end a conversation, is if we just say, oh, you just want to kill babies. You know, for someone who's pro-choice, like, no, they're not just saying they want to kill babies. They have something legitimately that they're upset about. So we're going to repeat back to them after we've listened for what we can agree with, after we've listened to understand, we're going to say, hey, what I hear you saying is, and then you repeat back what they said. That will give them the opportunity, number one, to know that you have fully understood what they said, that they have been heard, which again, that a lot of times is their deepest desires, to be heard and understood. And it also gives them the opportunity, when you repeat back what they said, you say, is that what you're saying? You verify this is in fact what you're saying. And that will give them the chance to say either, yes, that's exactly what I'm saying, or no, you still don't get it. And then they can clarify something. And then again, you say, okay, let me try that again. You repeat it back to see if you can repeat it back so you understand what they are saying. Because again, that is the number one most important thing. And then finally is asking clarifying questions. And so raise your hand if you read the book Tactics by Greg Koukl. We have just a couple of them. So Greg Koukl's Tactics book is great for this because it talks about how you can ask questions. One of the biggest questions you ask is, what do you mean by that? And so we're going to talk about that one in the linguistic theft chat, or in the linguistic theft talk, is sometimes when they say, oh, I really hate the injustice going on with blah, 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 blah. You say, oh, what do you mean by injustice? They need to define it, because you got to realize there's category words and then there's information words. Things like injustice, equality, fair, all those things are category words, which they have basically said, here's the data, and I've classified it as justice or injustice, you know, all these things that we would already agree with, justice, equality, boo to oppression. Ask them what they mean by that and make them clarify what they mean, because there's a phrase that Dennis Prager uses that I think is fabulous. And I think if we all followed this, it would be good. It's clarity over agreement. That you're not always going to be able to come to agreement, but if you can at least have clarity. And I would say that the verse in, I'm bad with locations, the verse that says, as far as it depends on you, live at peace with all men. I think part of us being able to live at peace is to have clarity with them. And so they don't think that we're misrepresenting them. They're not thinking that we don't listen, all that stuff. So this is just kind of something that you can help model with your kids. The chew and spit method will help you to, when they listen to a person, to know there'll be things I agree with and things that I don't agree with. And then the roar method, when you learn how to do that with culture, they're going to learn to do that with the people with whom they're talking. And so what you can do at that point is, when you need to disagree, you do what I call an affirmation sandwich. So affirmation sandwich starts with the thing that you agree with. So I'm going to use an example that I've seen be really, what's the word, polarizing on social media. And that is the separation of children at the border. There's a lot of people who are just vehemently on two sides of that. So let's pretend that we're in a conversation where someone is screaming at us, so angry about how they separated children at the border. How do we do an affirmation sandwich with that? So affirmation sandwich would say, oh my gosh, I totally agree. Separating children from their parents is so traumatic. I remember a time when I was separated from my parents at Disney World, and I was so scared, and I would hate to think that we're doing that to the kids down there. You've just demonstrated that you heard what their concern is. And now in the middle of your affirmation sandwich, you're going to find maybe something that you disagree with, but you can phrase it as a question. You can say, yeah, because I care so much about those kids, but it makes me wonder, I've heard that like over 500 of the kids, they can't find the parents. And the reason for that is the people that they came with share no genetic markers. They did genetic tests on them. So these kids are with strangers. So I want the kids to be with their parents, but how would we separate them from maybe people who are trying to traffic these children? Because you and I can both agree that trafficking children is a bad idea, right? So now we've stated that disagreement kind of as a question, something that they also might agree with. And then again, you reaffirm your affirmation sandwich. But yes, I totally agree. We shouldn't separate kids from their parents. And then end again. How would you solve the problem of making sure that these children aren't being trafficked? Affirmation, new information with a question that they probably would care about as well, based on the values that they already expressed, affirming their position again, and then asking for them to contribute. What are your thoughts on this? There are very few people that don't, my dad always told me that if you want to have a good conversation with someone, just ask them questions about their self and they will leave thinking it's the best conversation they've ever had. People innately want to share their thoughts. They want to share their ideas. So when we point this out and then we ask them for their ideas on this very specific issue, this very specific point that we're trying to make, it gives them the ability to understand where we're coming from and then productively dialogue with it. So that is going to be kind of how we can train our kids to be interacting with people. I truly, truly believe that if you want your kids and your grandkids to be set apart the way Christ has called us to be set apart, learning how to dialogue like this will set them apart from everybody. It's kind of sad because it's a really low bar of just being able to talk in a civil way, to have civil disagreements. But as we've seen, just especially in this political climate, that is a lost art. And if we want to be set apart as Christ followers, people will notice if we basically are able to engage in a loving way. And so finally, I want to talk about preparing our kids to withstand cancel culture. So first off, we need to know what they're up against. We've talked a little bit about this, but I want to talk a little bit about the concept of fight or flight. So raise your hand if you know what the concept of fight or flight is. Okay, most everybody does. So fight or flight, you've got your amygdala in your brain, which is the side of the side of the emotional processing. And then you have your prefrontal cortex, and that's the site of rational thinking. What some people don't know is that when your amygdala is really on fire, it actually shuts down your rational thinking. And the reason for this is, like, say that, I'm getting chased by a bear. I don't have time to think about anything. I just run. Or if I'm being attacked, I'm just going to act in self-defense and I'm not even going to think about it. It can't go through the rational part. That's where your instincts come in. While I was writing the Mama Bear book with the rest of the Mama Bears, I realized that something is going on in our culture, and that's that people are mistaking fight or flight for a feeling of empowerment. And everything is about being empowered. Girl power, Black power, minority power, LGBT power. Everybody wants to feel empowered. And that rush that you get from having your amygdala turned on gives them the feeling of empowerment. However, the way that they're reacting in there is very irrational usually. It's emotionalism, which means the stronger I feel something, the more true it is. And if you don't agree, I need to emote more and more and more until you agree. So when we teach our kids to be expecting this, something that first responders do when someone has been in an accident, let me check our time here, we're still doing good, is that they start asking questions. So they say, what did you eat for breakfast this morning? What is your address? What's your phone number? What they're doing is they're trying to turn off that amygdala part and turn on the prefrontal cortex, where you can actually have a conversation. So teaching our kids maybe how to help people get out of that fight or flight is important. The second thing to really teach them, and I don't have time to go into this, but I'm just going to show you a book, is teaching kids to spot logical fallacy. So here's a good one for kids right here, The Fallacy Detective. It's got lots of cartoons and stuff. Because what I've noticed is a lot of the things that have been considered logical fallacies for centuries are now actually being used as forms of knowledge. So raise your hand if you've heard people talk about lived experience. So lived experience, they say, well, this is the way something is. This is my experience. Well, if you were to go into the logical fallacies, that's going to be the fallacy of hasty generalization. Hasty generalization says, I have this small amount of evidence for something, therefore it's true for everything. But what our society is doing is they're not identifying that as a logical fallacy. They're actually saying, you can't argue against this. You can't argue against my lived experience. So I think it's very empowering for kids when we teach them the different logical fallacies, that they recognize it when someone's talking and they don't feel the need to respond to those. You know, you would have the ad hominem where it's just attacking a person, you know, your idea is wrong because you're stupid is basically what it is. It's a logical fallacy. With some of them, poisoning, the genetic fallacy, this one's a big one right now. That because of the person from whom this idea came from, the idea is itself wrong. And talking about Christianity, oh, that was all just written by, I actually had someone say, oh, the Bible was just written by white males, because white males are like the pariahs right now of all culture. And first off, I had to point to them, do you think Middle Eastern is white? And they said, well, no. I'm like, well, so it wasn't white males. But then even just the idea of it being males, if it's coming from a male, it's someone that is trying to maintain their superiority, therefore we can't believe what they say. This is being used to discredit things, but if you teach your kids this is a logical fallacy, it's not going to confuse them as much when they come to it. And then finally, for preparing for cancel culture is this idea for preparing for persecution. So I want to bring up the screen here for you again that goes through the different verses. So just take a chance to maybe take a picture of that. And I'm going to go through as many as we can. We've got, go back. We've got, I think, 7 minutes left before we start doing Q&A. So you've got pictures of that. Oop, how do I get it? No. Oh, stop screen. Oh, I didn't even start sharing the screen. Sorry. That one. If you want to take a screenshot of that. Okay. How come? Okay, stop sharing. Okay, there we go. So these are the verses I want to talk about real quickly. Let's see what time it is. 2:58. Oh shoot. Did we go through 3:15? Is that right, Cynthia? Okay. So teaching them what to expect. This is an analogy that I like to use. So we're going to talk about those verses in a second, but I want to give you a kind of a picture of what's going on. Imagine that you were walking through a park and you just had some 300-pound guy run at you and tackle you. That would probably feel very unfair. You probably wouldn't know what was going on. You'd probably be angry. You might ask God, what the heck are you doing? You might press charges. There's a lot of ways that you would respond to this, right? Because I'm walking in a park. I should not be tackled. Now, picture that you're in a different location, that you were on a football field, and now you have a 300-pound guy running to tackle you. That's a very different situation. Usually I like asking audience things, but I can't do that on this. What makes that situation different is that you realize that you're in a football game. You realize that part of this football game involves 300-pound guys running to tackle you. It does not feel unfair anymore. It's not a surprise. You can brace for impact, which means you're probably less likely to get injured. And again, you know that this is what to expect. So when we're preparing our kids to withstand cancel culture, we need to they need to understand basically what scripture has promised. There's those books that are like 101 promises from God. And if I wrote that, it would be a lot shorter and probably less popular, because it would be something along the lines of, you are promised trials and tribulations, but you are promised that Christ will be there with you. And so I've actually, I've worked with football players. I used to be an athletic trainer. I've seen the injuries on the guys that got blindsided by someone who were tackled and they never saw it coming. The injuries are a lot worse than the injuries on someone who sees the guy coming. He kind of knew what play they were going to do, and he actually braces for impact. We need to do the same thing with our kids to teach them how to brace for impact. And so they need to know, A, that they're going to be persecuted, and B, they need to know what's worth being persecuted over. So we're going to go through some of these verses here. As we talked about in that original biblical cancel culture, Jesus was the ultimate victim of cancel culture. And so why was it that he was canceled? So John 15:18. Oh, sorry. This is where I was going to read here because it's a little bit longer. Or do I have it in here? 1 second. Oh, yeah, here we go. John 15:18 through 22. If the world hates you, be aware that it hated me first. If you belong to the world would love you as its own. However, because you do not belong to the world, but I chose you out of the world, for this reason, the world hates you. Remember what I told you. A slave is not greater than his master. If they persecuted me, they will persecute you. We knew this when we became Christians, but we've never had to face it until probably now, right? Our kids need to know to expect this and what it's going to look like. The injuries will be far less when they know what to expect. But then secondly, we need to look at, why was Jesus hated? So in John 7:7, he's with his brothers and they're saying, go present yourself to to everybody. Come on, you're the Messiah, right? Well, Jesus knew what being the Messiah was going to mean. It meant death for him. So this is how he responds. He says, the world cannot hate you, but it hates me because I am testifying about that its deeds are evil. So this goes against the loving Jesus that's this, mild-mannered man telling other mild-mannered men to be more mild-mannered. No, Jesus of the Bible is the one that's coming. He is loving, but he absolutely is saying that your deeds are evil, and that people either repent from that or they get angry and crucify him. But what I want to point out is Jesus is the one saying that their deeds are evil. There's not a lot of places where we in scripture are called to go out and tell the world that their deeds are evil. In fact, Paul even says, why do you think we're judging people outside the church? What business of that is mine? Judge those inside the church. I think we as a church in general have gotten this backwards, that we are so known for preaching to the world what they're doing wrong that we haven't cleaned our own house. And this is what we're seeing right now going on with the Church Too movement, where thankfully houses are starting to get cleaned, and it's not pretty and heroes are falling, but it's because we were not doing that work within our own walls. So now let's look at why we're going to be hated. 1 Peter 4:4. So they are astonished when you do not rush with them into the same flood of wickedness, and they vilify you. So notice again, it's nothing that's being said, and it's not even something that someone is doing. It's what they're not doing. This would be the Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego thing. They're not bowing to the idol. And this is why I actually asked you the question at the very beginning, the poll, how much time do we have, that was an actual email that I got from a mama bear that emailed and said, I don't know what to do. My daughter's school is having to wear orange for LGBT Day. If she doesn't wear it, she will be the only one at school not wearing it. And they are going to basically be telling that she's hateful, she's bigoted. And when it comes to LGBT stuff, they have the ace of spades. If people like you who don't accept us are the reason why we commit suicide. Imagine your daughter thinking, in order to not support something that she is not supposed to support, according to the Bible, that someone's going to tell them, you are the cause for the suicides that go on. That's a heavy burden. But again, blessed that we're not rushing into the same flood of wickedness, and they vilify us for that. Next one is Matthew 5:12. Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you when others revile you and persecute you and utter all kinds of evil against you falsely on my account. So again, this is not someone who is going out and loudly proclaiming to the world you are evil. This is someone who is themselves keeping their nose clean. They are acting righteously. This is why people, the one thing that I did get called all the time was a goody-goody, that this idea that people will persecute you for being righteous, for actually taking holiness seriously. But again, this doesn't mean that we have to, there's our timer. So, good, we're finishing right on time. This does not mean we need to go loudly proclaiming stuff. Remember, don't let yourself be persecuted for being obnoxious. If you're going to be persecuted, let it be for your righteousness. And then finally, this is kind of the apologist's favorite verse that I think summarizes all of this. But set apart Christ as Lord in your hearts, always being ready to give an answer to anyone who asks you for the hope you possess. Now, there are times when we are called to go out and speak, as in the case of evangelism, but there's also times when our righteousness is to shine so much that people ask. And if they're not seeing a difference, then you might want to ask why they're not seeing a difference. And I still maintain that knowing how to disagree well will set them apart. So the second part of this verse is, to give an answer for the hope, yet do it with courtesy and respect, keeping a good conscience. So those who slander your good conduct, again, what are we being persecuted for? What are we being slandered for? Good conduct, not going out and screaming sinner. Those who slander your good conduct in Christ may be put to shame when they accuse you. For it is better to suffer for doing good, if God wills, than for doing evil. Again, be persecuted for righteousness, not for being obnoxious. And then finally, I want to say that one of our jobs as Christians, and something I think we need to prepare our children for, is that part of our job as Christians is to absorb anger, to absorb vitriol. Now, if it's something like, kids are teasing your kid because she has a limp or a lisp or something like that, yeah, stand up for yourself. But sometimes you're not dealing with the person who, the person's not even yelling at you. They're yelling at some other Christian that they know. So you're not just representing Christ. You at that moment are representing every Christian they have ever met. And if they've met some bad Christians, then you need to absorb that. And that is the only way to stop that cycle. And I think there's a statement to be said that Jesus, before his accusers, was silent all throughout the trial. When they were accusing him, he didn't try to be like, no, I'm not. No, I'm not. I know, I know you are, but what am I? He was just went ahead and be silent. He absorbed. So just kind of in summary, we talked about what cancel culture is, how to interact with ideas. So remember our chew and spit method. Everybody got that? Remember, we're going to separate the good from the bad, accept the good, reject the bad. On the roar, we're going to recognize the message, offer discernment, argue for a healthier approach, and then reinforce these ideas. We're going to be listening well, listening to understand, listening for what we agree with, making sure that we're stating it the way that they understood their own statement, and then asking clarifying questions. And then for preparing our kids to withstand cancel culture, they need to know what they're up against. Look at logical fallacies, look at linguistic theft. Teach them the football analogy. Be like, you know what, this is what we signed up for when we became Christians, and don't be surprised. And then finally, know that if they don't need to be telling the world that they're evil, point to Christ, point back to Christ, point back to Christ, point to the Bible. Oh, are you saying that I'm going to hell? No, I'm not saying it. I'm saying this is what the Bible teaches. Do not take that burden on. This is what I believe. Put that burden on. This is what the Bible teaches. And so with those tools, I think we can help with kids to withstand cancel culture. So thank you very much. And we still have a little bit of time for questions. Yep, we still got time for questions.
Thank you very much, Hillary. Can everybody hear me okay? You don't need to see me. I'm just going to throw out some of the questions that appeared in the chat. Okay, somebody asked where they can buy your book.
Oh, you can buy it on Amazon. Some Barnes and Nobles carry it. Let's see, Target online, christianbooks.com. If you just Google Mama Bear Apologetics, you'll have a whole slew of places that show up. And it's also available on audio, on audiobook, Audible. Yeah, and I'm the one reading it. And on Kindle.
Okay, and what exactly is your website?
www.bearapologetics.com. So people have all sorts of weird ways of spelling mama. So it's M-A-M-A. I've gotten like 12 different spellings of it before. I'm like, how is there that many?
Okay, just getting this in the chat for everyone. Okay, question. Is there a meta, this is from Bruce and Monica, by the way, is there a meta fallacy where logic isn't accepted? Not bad reasoning, but just not accepting reason or logic.
Yes. And in fact, if you've been following what's going on with the book White Fragility, and see, I've got it. Who's it by? Robin something or other. It's over here somewhere. Robin DiAngelo. There's something that she created for, I can't remember who it was for, but it was going through basically defining what whiteness was. And one of the things in whiteness was logical thinking. What was the other one? It was cause and effect thinking. And I was just like, oh my gosh, that to me sounded like the most racist thing I'd ever seen. Like, to tell people that this is a white characteristic and not a minority characteristic was to have logical thinking. I was like, oh my gosh, like this is so offensive to me. But yeah, that's being told that the logical thinking, it's also a product of the WASP, the white Anglo-Saxon Protestant, and then usually males. And so they will lived experience is king. But at that point, what are you going to do? You can just be like, okay, if you don't agree with logic, I don't know if we can really have this conversation. I'm going to go ahead with logic and evidence and cause and effect, and you do you, boo.
Okay, another question from TC this time. What sites do you use to keep up with what is going on in the world or our country to get an accurate accounting?
An accurate accounting. I don't think we can find an accurate accounting, honestly. Like, I've just given up on journalists. I think it's good to probably look. I have a lot of friends that they watch CNN and they watch Fox, and they figure between the two of those, they'll be able to hear what's going on. I think if you really want to understand what's currently going on, there's a couple books. Number one is this one. I can't recommend this enough. Rules for Radicals. This was written by a guy named Saul Alinsky. He was what's called a community organizer in Chicago, very heavily influenced Barack Obama, because Barack Obama was also in Chicago, and Hillary Clinton wrote her dissertation on him. And I would like to read his dedication at the beginning of this. We're going to be going into this a lot in the next on the linguistic theft. So let's see, lest we forget at least an over-the-shoulder acknowledgement to the very first radical. From all our legends, mythology, and history, the first radical known to man who rebelled against the establishment and did it so effectively that he at least won his own kingdom, Lucifer. So, yay, Satan, the first radical. So it's like, that'll tell you kind of from where he's going. This book will kind of explain what's going on. If you want to understand the social justice movement, this is the book that I recommend right here, Unjust by Noah Rothman. This is an eye-opener, and we'll be going into this a little bit in the next talk. And then finally, where is it? I just had it. Oh, look at this. This is a great book also. Highly recommend this resource. That's not the one I was looking for, though. My desk is full. Well, there it is. Sorry, hopefully stuff doesn't start falling. This one right here, Cynical Theories. This one is going to go through basically the crazy thoughts that people are having right now, and how they are actually coming to the reasoning that they're coming to. Basically, if things sound really irrational, this is going to explain where that's coming from, so you can understand this is what's going to be softly peddled to all your kids that are in elementary, middle school, and high school. And this is what will be openly taught to the kids that you send to college. And so if you want to understand what's going on, this is a great summary of a lot of those.
Okay, what is the church? This is from Twos.
Okay.
What is the Church Two movement?
Oh, the Church Two movement. That would be, so the Me Too movement is sexual abuse, where we really, really have an issue with this. I mean, I'm sure it's not just in our country, but the next book that we're working on right now is actually in regards to sexuality. That it is so messed up right now. So, and the amount of cover up that goes from sexual abuse is just insane. So like, I'm Facebook friends. We were friends before this all went out. The whole Larry Nassar thing with Rachel Den Hollander, that she is an absolute champion and pioneer. So now after people started saying, oh, I was sexually assaulted, then you had all these people doing #MeToo. Well, now what you have is all this stuff coming out in the church, and people saying the guy that raped me when he was a youth leader is still in the pulpit, and they are reporting it as a consensual affair. Unfortunately, we just had a bunch of stuff with Ravi Zacharias come out that's kind of not great. And so the Church Too movement is saying it's not just Me Too, it's Church Too. And, you know, we've been so focused on the Catholic diocese, that we have not looked within the Protestant evangelical church. And that list is just getting worse and worse. And I think it's a good thing. I've been praying that the Lord would expose corruption wherever it's found. And I see him answering that prayer with all the stuff that's coming out in the church. So that's what the Church Too movement is.
Okay. I think that's the end of the questions that we have in the chat. Last chance, anybody? Okay, then everybody, please, let me change this. Okay, you can unmute yourself and let's give Hillary a hand.
Thank you.
Everybody know how to turn on your microphone and let's
I can see it. I can see the hands moving. I'll just, thank you.